Have you ever been laughed at in front of everyone you know, feeling like your heart was being ripped into a million pieces while the whole world watched and did nothing to help you? Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and revenge, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Heartbound Stories. We love hearing from you, so drop a comment telling us where you are watching from right now. The lunch bell rang across Oakwood High School like it did every single day. Students poured into the courtyard, laughing and talking, completely unaware that something terrible was about to happen. Emma Rivers stood near the prom registration table, holding a form in her shaking hands. She was 17 years old, wearing her usual baggy sweater and old jeans, her long black hair covering half her face like a curtain she could hide behind. Emma had been thinking about prom for weeks. Not because she cared about fancy dresses or slow dances, but because for once, just once, she wanted to feel normal. She wanted to be part of something special, something that other kids talked about for years afterward. She wanted to make one good memory in a school where most of her days felt like survival. But then Marcus Drake appeared. Marcus was the kind of boy who seemed to have everything. His father owned the biggest car dealership in the entire city, with shiny buildings and commercials on television. Marcus drove a different expensive car every week, wore clothes that cost more than most families spent on food in a month, and had a smile that made people forget he could be mean. He was tall, with perfect hair and perfect teeth, and he knew that most students would do anything to be his friend. More than 200 students had gathered in the courtyard for lunch. They sat on benches, stood in groups, ate their sandwiches and laughed at videos on their phones. Nobody was paying attention to Emma as she stood there with her prom form, trying to gather enough courage to actually sign it and turn it in. Then Marcus's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "If you fit into this dress, I'll go to prom with you." Everyone went silent. It was the kind of silence that makes your stomach hurt, the kind that means something bad is happening and everyone knows it. Emma looked up and saw Marcus standing in the middle of the courtyard, holding a bright red dress above his head like a prize. The dress was so small it looked like it was made for a little girl, not a teenager. Marcus waved it back and forth, and his friends beside him started laughing. Emma felt her whole body freeze. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Everyone was staring at her now. 200 pairs of eyes, all locked on her face, waiting to see what would happen next. "I'm serious, everyone," Marcus continued, his voice loud and happy like he was giving away free money. "Emma wants to go to prom so badly that I'm going to give her a real chance. If she can fit into this dress by graduation day, I'll take her as my date. How generous am I?" The laughter started small, just a few giggles here and there, but then it grew louder and louder until it felt like the whole school was laughing at her. Students pulled out their phones. Emma could see the little red lights that meant they were recording. She knew that in a few minutes, this moment would be on the internet for everyone in the world to see. "Marcus, stop it," whispered Lily, one of Emma's only friends. But her voice was too quiet. Nobody heard her except Emma, and even if they had heard, Emma knew they wouldn't have cared. What Marcus Drake didn't know, what none of these kids knew, was that Emma Rivers was not just some quiet girl they could push around forever. Yes, she struggled with her weight. Yes, she wore old clothes and thick glasses. Yes, she kept to herself and barely talked in class. But hidden underneath all of that was something Marcus could never buy with all his father's money. Emma had an IQ of 156, which meant she was smarter than almost everyone she had ever met. And she had been teaching herself how to hack into computer systems since she was 12 years old. She learned because she needed to protect herself, because knowledge was the only weapon she had in a world that seemed to want to hurt her. When Emma was 12, someone at school had started a cruel website with lies about her. The lies spread fast, and soon everyone believed them. Emma spent weeks crying in her room, feeling helpless and alone. But then one night, she stopped crying and started learning. She watched videos, read articles, and practiced on old computers until she figured out how to trace the website back to its owner. Then she hacked into the school system and found proof of who had made it. The website disappeared the next day, and the lies stopped. Since then, Emma had gotten better and better at understanding computers, at seeing patterns and breaking codes. She could slip into systems like a ghost, find information that people thought was hidden forever, and get out without anyone knowing she had been there. It was her secret superpower, and she had never used it to hurt anyone. She only used it to protect herself and help her mother pay their bills by fixing computer problems for small businesses in town. Now, standing in that courtyard with everyone laughing and phones recording and Marcus waving that tiny red dress like a flag of victory, Emma felt something change inside her. Her brain, which had been frozen with shock and embarrassment, suddenly started working again. But this time it wasn't thinking about how to hide or run away. It was thinking about something else entirely. Emma looked at Marcus. Then she looked at the dress. Then she looked at all the faces around her, hungry for drama, excited to see her break down and cry. Her mind started calculating, planning, seeing moves ahead like a chess player who knows exactly how the game will end. "I accept," Emma said. Her voice was steady and clear, cutting through the laughter like a beam of light through darkness. The courtyard erupted again. Students screamed and cheered like they were at a sports game. But Emma kept her eyes on Marcus, who blinked several times, his smile flickering for just a second. He clearly had not expected her to say yes. "Wait, really?" Marcus laughed, but Emma could hear something nervous in his voice now. "Okay then, you've got until the dance. 6 weeks. Let's see what happens." As Marcus walked away with his friends, making jokes that Emma pretended not to hear, she carefully folded the red dress and put it in her backpack. Her hands were steady now. Her heart had stopped racing. Behind her thick glasses, her eyes had a calm, quiet look that only comes to people who have survived terrible things and discovered they are stronger than they ever knew. That afternoon, while the entire school was texting and posting and talking about Emma's pathetic bet, she sat at home in front of 3 computer monitors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing codes and commands that would take Marcus years to understand even if someone tried to teach him. Emma was about to discover something about the golden boy of Oakwood High School, something that would make that red dress seem like the smallest problem in the world. What she found in the Drake family's private files would change everything. The video of Emma's humiliation spread across the internet like wildfire. By the time she got home from school, the hashtag dress challenge had already been viewed 50,000 times on social media. The comments section was filled with cruel jokes and fake sympathy. Someone wrote, "Poor girl, someone needs to tell her it's impossible." Another person replied, "Marcus is mean, but at least he's being honest about it." Marcus loved every second of the attention. His social media stories showed him at his father's fancy country club with his friends, drinking expensive smoothies and making jokes about Mission Impossible. He had turned Emma's pain into his own personal entertainment show, and his followers were eating it up like candy. "Hey everyone, daily updates on the Emma project," Marcus shouted into his phone camera with that fake excited voice that internet celebrities use. "Day 1 and she still hasn't shown up at the gym. I bet she's already given up." His friends laughed in the background like a pack of wild animals celebrating a hunt. What Marcus didn't know was that Emma Chan had been carrying heavy weights on her shoulders for much longer than 6 weeks. Her relationship with food and her body wasn't about vanity or trying to look like the girls in magazines. It was about survival, about finding comfort in a world that felt cold and cruel. When Emma was 14 years old, her father left. He didn't just walk out the door emotionally. He disappeared completely, leaving Emma's mother buried under a mountain of debt that seemed impossible to climb. Her mother, who had moved to America from China with dreams of a better life, suddenly found herself working 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep their tiny apartment and put food on the table. Emma watched her mother leave for work before the sun came up and return home long after it went down. She saw the tiredness in her mother's eyes, the way her hands shook from exhaustion, the bills stacked on the kitchen counter that never seemed to get smaller. And Emma felt powerless. She was just a kid. What could she do to help? So she ate. When the anxiety felt like it was crushing her chest, she ate. When she worried about losing their home, she ate. When she missed her father even though he had abandoned them, she ate. Every extra pound became like armor, a layer of protection against a world that seemed determined to break her family into pieces. Food was the only thing that made her feel safe, even if just for a few minutes. But then, when Emma turned 15, something amazing happened. She discovered that her brain was special, that she could do things with computers that most people couldn't even imagine. It started by accident one afternoon at the public library. Emma had checked out some programming books because she was curious about how websites worked. But she kept them too long and the return date had passed. The library system said she owed late fees that her family couldn't afford to pay. So Emma, sitting at one of the library computers, started poking around in the system just to see if she could extend her return date by a few days. Within an hour, she had accidentally hacked into the entire library network. She could see everything, every book, every account, every password. She panicked at first, thinking she would get in terrible trouble. But then Mr. Chen, the librarian who happened to share her last name even though they weren't related, noticed what she was doing. Instead of calling the police or banning her from the library, Mr. Chen smiled. He was an old man who had worked as a programmer for big companies before he retired. He recognized something special in Emma, a natural talent that was rare and precious. "Knowledge is power, Emma," he told her that day, his eyes twinkling behind his own thick glasses. "And power, when used the right way, can move mountains. Let me teach you everything I know." For the next 3 years, Mr. Chen became Emma's mentor. He taught her programming languages, how to understand networks and systems, how to find weaknesses in security, and most importantly, how to use her gifts responsibly. Emma soaked up every lesson like a sponge. She practiced for hours every day, getting better and better until she could navigate through computer systems like a fish swimming through water. By the time she was 17, Emma wasn't just the best science student at Oakwood High School. She was also working secretly as what people called a ghostwriter of systems. Small businesses in town would hire her to fix their computer problems, build websites, and protect their data from hackers. She never met her clients in person. Everything happened online, through encrypted messages and anonymous payments. But the money she earned was real, and it was enough to give her mother something she hadn't had in years: a vacation, a break, a chance to breathe. Emma's fingers could do more on a keyboard than Marcus could do with all his father's fortune. While he bought expensive cars and threw parties, Emma was building skills that actually mattered, skills that gave her real power in the world. Now, while Marcus posted another cruel video making fun of how Emma would look at prom, she sat in her small bedroom surrounded by 3 glowing computer monitors. The blue light reflected off her glasses as her fingers danced across the keyboard, typing code that looked like a foreign language to anyone who didn't understand programming. She wasn't researching diets or exercise plans. She was doing something far more interesting. She was digging into the Drake family's digital footprint, following trails of information that most people didn't even know existed. It started simple. Emma looked at the public records first, the things anyone could find if they knew where to look. Tax documents, business filings, property records. The Drake family owned 12 car dealerships across 3 states. Their company was worth millions of dollars. Everything looked perfect on the surface, like a shiny car in a showroom. But Emma had learned from Mr. Chan that the most interesting information was never on the surface. It was buried deep, hidden behind passwords and firewalls and security systems that people thought were unbreakable. So she went deeper. She found the family's private email server. It took her 2 days to crack the encryption, but once she was inside, it was like opening a treasure chest. Thousands of emails, many of them between Marcus's father and his business partners. Emma read through them carefully, looking for patterns, for anything that seemed strange or wrong. At first, everything seemed normal. Business talk, meeting schedules, sales reports. But then Emma noticed something odd. There were emails about cars being sold that didn't match the inventory reports filed with the government. Cars were disappearing from the records, but the money from selling them wasn't being reported as income. Emma's heart started beating faster. She recognized what this meant. Tax fraud. Marcus's father was hiding money from the government, probably to avoid paying taxes. It was illegal, and if caught, he could go to prison. But that wasn't all. Emma kept digging and found something even worse. There were messages between Marcus's father and a local politician about donations, about favors, about fixing problems that should have gotten the Drake dealerships in trouble with the law. It was corruption, plain and simple. Emma sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had been looking for something to even the playing field with Marcus, maybe an embarrassing secret or a stupid mistake she could use to make him think twice about bullying her. But what she had found was so much bigger than that. This was the kind of information that could destroy the Drake family's entire empire. For a moment, Emma felt scared. This was dangerous knowledge. These were powerful people who wouldn't want anyone to know what they were doing. But then she remembered standing in that courtyard, remembered the laughter and the phone's recording and Marcus waving that tiny dress like a weapon meant to destroy her spirit. She saved copies of everything she found, encrypted them, and hid them in places only she could access. She wasn't sure yet what she would do with this information. She just knew that Marcus Drake had made a terrible mistake when he chose her as his target. He had humiliated the one person in school who had the skills to look behind his family's expensive curtain and see the ugly truth hiding there. Over the next few weeks, Marcus continued his campaign of cruelty. He posted daily updates mocking Emma. He made videos of himself eating salads and working out, always adding comments about how Emma probably couldn't even touch her toes. His friends joined in, creating memes and jokes that spread across the school like a disease. But Emma stayed quiet. She went to school, sat through her classes, and ignored the whispers and giggles that followed her in the hallways. At home, she continued her investigation, finding more and more evidence of the Drake family's crimes. She also did something else, something that surprised even her. She started taking care of herself, not because of Marcus's challenge, but because she decided she deserved to feel strong and healthy. She began walking every morning before school. Not to lose weight, but to clear her mind and feel the power of her own body. She started eating better, not by starving herself, but by learning about nutrition and giving her body the fuel it needed. She did it for herself, not for Marcus or anyone else. As prom night got closer, the whole school was buzzing with excitement and cruel anticipation. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when Emma showed up. Would she fit in the dress? Would Marcus actually take her? Would she even have the courage to come? What nobody knew was that Emma had already won. The red dress was the least important part of her plan. Prom night arrived on a warm Saturday evening in May. The school gymnasium had been transformed into something magical, with twinkling lights hanging from the ceiling like stars and tables covered in white cloth and flowers. A DJ played music in the corner while a photographer set up a backdrop for pictures. Students arrived in fancy cars, the girls wearing colorful dresses that sparkled under the lights, the boys in suits and ties that made them look older than they were. Marcus Drake arrived exactly the way everyone expected, in a bright red sports car that probably cost more than most people's houses. He wore a black tuxedo that fit him perfectly, and his date was Vanessa Pierce, the head cheerleader who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. They posed for pictures while everyone crowded around them, snapping photos and posting them online with captions about the perfect couple. But even as Marcus smiled for the cameras, his eyes kept darting toward the entrance. Emma hadn't arrived yet, and he was clearly wondering if she would actually show up. Part of him probably hoped she wouldn't, that she had given up and would spare him the awkward situation of having to reject her publicly. But another part of him, the cruel part that enjoyed watching people squirm, wanted her to come so he could deliver the final blow to her dignity. Inside the gymnasium, whispers spread through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Have you seen Emma yet? Do you think she'll actually come? Did she fit into the dress? The whole school had been talking about nothing else for 6 weeks. The dress challenge had become legendary, a story people would tell for years about the weird, quiet girl who accepted an impossible bet from the richest boy in school. Then, at exactly 8 o'clock, the gymnasium doors opened and Emma Rivers walked in. The music didn't stop. The DJ didn't know to stop it. But everything else seemed to freeze as every head in the room turned to look at her. The whispers died away, replaced by a shocked silence that was even louder than any noise. Emma wore the red dress. But she didn't just wear it. She owned it. The dress that Marcus had waved around 6 weeks ago as a symbol of mockery now hugged her body perfectly, showing that she had transformed herself in ways no one had expected. But more than the dress, more than her new appearance, it was the way she carried herself that shocked everyone. Her head was held high. Her shoulders were back. Behind her glasses, her eyes were clear and confident, blazing with a quiet power that made even the popular kids take a step back. She had lost some weight through her morning walks and healthier eating, yes. But that wasn't what made her beautiful. It was the strength radiating from inside her, the knowledge that she had survived their mockery and come out stronger. She walked across that gymnasium floor like a queen walking through her kingdom, and every person there knew they were witnessing something they would never forget. Marcus's smile faltered. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. Vanessa looked at Emma, then at Marcus, her perfectly painted lips forming a small O of surprise. Around them, students pulled out their phones again, but this time they weren't laughing. They were amazed. Emma walked straight up to Marcus. The crowd parted for her like the sea, everyone pressing back to give them space. When she stood in front of him, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him with those calm, knowing eyes, and Marcus suddenly felt very small despite being a head taller than her. "I fit into the dress," Emma said simply. Her voice carried across the silent gymnasium. "So I believe you owe me a dance." Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. His brain seemed to be short-circuiting, trying to find some way out of the trap he had set for himself 6 weeks ago. Everyone was watching. Everyone was recording. If he backed out now, he would look like a coward and a liar. But if he danced with Emma, he would be admitting that she had beaten him, that the girl he had tried to destroy had somehow won. Before Marcus could decide what to do, the principal, Mrs. Anderson, stepped forward with a microphone in her hand. She was a tall woman with gray hair and a no-nonsense expression that had frightened students for 20 years. She tapped the microphone twice, and the speakers crackled to attention. "Before we continue with our dance," Mrs. Anderson said, her voice serious and heavy, "I have an announcement to make. Earlier today, this school received some very troubling information about illegal activities involving one of our students' families. The police have been notified, and an investigation is currently underway." The gymnasium erupted in confused whispers. Marcus's face went from pale to completely white, like all the blood had drained out of his body. He looked at Emma, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that terrified him. She knew. Somehow, impossibly, she knew. Mrs. Anderson continued, "I want to be clear that this school does not tolerate bullying, harassment, or the abuse of privilege. We have reviewed several videos from the past 6 weeks that show unacceptable behavior toward another student. The students involved will face serious consequences, including possible suspension and the loss of graduation privileges." Marcus's friends, who had been laughing and recording Emma's humiliation 6 weeks ago, suddenly looked at each other with panic in their eyes. Some of them started backing toward the exits, as if they could somehow escape what was coming. "Additionally," Mrs. Anderson said, looking directly at Marcus now, "I want to address the young man who started this entire situation. Marcus Drake, you used your wealth and social status to publicly humiliate Emma Rivers. You made a bet designed to break her spirit. But what you didn't realize is that Emma is worth 100 of you. While you were posting cruel videos, she was building her future. While you were laughing at her pain, she was developing skills that will take her farther than your father's money ever could." The gymnasium was so quiet now that you could hear the air conditioning humming in the vents. Marcus stood frozen, his perfect facade cracking like thin ice. Vanessa had stepped away from him, suddenly realizing that being associated with Marcus Drake was no longer cool or desirable. Emma finally spoke, her voice carrying across the room with crystal clarity. "I didn't accept your challenge because I cared what you thought about me, Marcus. I accepted it because I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to know if I was strong enough to face my fears and become the person I was meant to be. And I am." She took a step closer to him, and Marcus actually flinched. "6 weeks ago, you tried to destroy me with that dress. But instead, you gave me a gift. You gave me motivation. You showed me that I needed to stop hiding from the world and start believing in myself. So thank you." The way she said thank you made it clear she meant the opposite. It was the kind of thank you that cuts deeper than any insult. "As for the dance," Emma continued, glancing at Vanessa, "I think I'll pass. You see, Marcus, I learned something important over these past 6 weeks. I learned that I don't need validation from people like you. I don't need to be accepted by bullies and liars. I need to respect myself, and I can't do that by dancing with someone who sees me as less than human." She turned to face the crowd of students watching with wide eyes and open mouths. "I also learned that staying silent when you see someone being hurt makes you part of the problem. So many of you watched Marcus humiliate me. Some of you laughed. Some of you recorded it and shared it online. Only a handful tried to help. I hope you'll think about that the next time you see someone being bullied." With that, Emma turned and walked toward the exit. But she didn't leave alone. Lily, her friend who had whispered for Marcus to stop that day in the courtyard, jumped up and ran after her. Then another student followed, a boy from Emma's science class who had always been kind. Then another, and another. By the time Emma reached the doors, at least 30 students were walking with her, leaving the prom behind to show their support. As they walked out into the cool night air, someone started clapping. Then someone else joined in. Within seconds, the sound of applause filled the parking lot, echoing off the cars and buildings like thunder. Emma smiled, a real genuine smile that lit up her whole face, and for the first time in 6 weeks, she felt truly free. Behind them, still standing in the gymnasium surrounded by his remaining friends who were quickly making excuses to leave, Marcus Drake finally understood what Emma had known from the beginning. Money can buy cars and clothes and fancy parties. But it can't buy character. It can't buy intelligence. And it can't buy the kind of strength that comes from surviving hard times and refusing to let cruel people break your spirit. The next Monday, news broke that Marcus's father had been arrested for tax fraud and corruption. The Drake family's car dealerships were shut down while investigators examined their records. Marcus himself was suspended from school for 3 weeks and would have to do community service and attend counseling sessions about bullying before he could graduate. His social media accounts, once flooded with adoring fans, were now filled with people calling him out for his cruelty. Emma, meanwhile, received a scholarship to study computer science at one of the best universities in the country. The letter arrived the same week as Marcus's suspension, and when Emma's mother read it, she cried tears of joy and pride. Her daughter, the girl she had worked so hard to support, was going to have opportunities that seemed impossible just a few years ago. On the last day of school, Emma stood in front of her locker, packing up her books and papers. Marcus appeared at the end of the hallway. He walked slowly toward her, his usual confidence completely gone. When he reached her, he stood there awkwardly, looking at the floor. "Emma," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. For everything. I was a terrible person to you, and you didn't deserve any of it." Emma looked at him for a long moment. She could see that he meant it, that the past few weeks had changed him in ways that might actually stick. But she also knew that sorry couldn't erase the pain he had caused, couldn't undo the viral videos or the public humiliation. "I accept your apology," she said finally. But accepting an apology doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing not to carry anger around like a heavy weight. "I'm letting go for me, not for you." Marcus nodded, understanding that this was all he deserved. He turned and walked away, his expensive shoes making soft sounds on the polished floor. Emma watched him go, then closed her locker for the last time. As she walked out of Oakwood High School that day, Emma thought about everything that had happened since that terrible afternoon in the courtyard. She thought about the red dress, about the cruel laughter, about the 6 weeks of mockery and the investigations she had conducted in secret. She thought about prom night and the applause in the parking lot and the scholarship letter that would change her life. Most of all, she thought about the lesson she had learned, that the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones who are scared of your potential. They see something in you that threatens them, something powerful and beautiful that they don't have. And when you refuse to shrink yourself to make them comfortable, when you stand tall despite their mockery and become exactly who you were meant to be, that's when you truly win. Emma Rivers had accepted an impossible challenge from a rich boy who thought he could break her. Instead, she had broken through every limit she had placed on herself and discovered that she was capable of amazing things. The red dress had never been about fitting into fabric and thread. It had been about fitting into her own skin, about accepting herself completely and refusing to apologize for taking up space in the world. And that was a lesson worth far more than any prom date could ever be.